Welcome to Ruck Smalls and Oval Balls. That's right, we're back again for some more rugby nonsense, and we're going to talk all things rugby union. But, as always, I am joined by the ever-present, the ever-knowledgeable Rory. Rory, say hello to the listener.
G'day, how are we? Nice to see you.
Well, what a lovely nod there from Rory to a completely useless nod towards the fact he's wearing an Australian jersey on an audio format. But yes, nice to see you too, Rory. Very glad to have you with us today. Once again, the listener may well be hearing a joyful, delightful tune in the background whilst we navigate the oceans that are the mundane banter and niceties. But, Rory, how are you feeling? How's things going?
Things are good. I've had a little weekend break in Denmark, but don't worry, that did not get in the way of me making sure I watched all of the games. And I've realised this week that I've got full-on Lions fever, hence the Australia jerseys, a nod to our erstwhile opponents.
Oh, absolutely. I cannot wait for Lions. I have a feeling we might be talking a little bit about that, but what were you doing in Denmark?
Enjoying some beautiful Scandinavian spring sunshine, drinking lots of beers in cafes and on the forecourts, and that was it, just mostly drinking beers.
Well, that sounds about right. Well, I was in the lovely rolling hills of the Suffolk countryside myself, albeit not as successfully watching all the rugby because we happened to be somewhere where there was zero mobile coverage, which, you know, is a bit of a hindrance when it comes to watching stuff. But, you know, we've each got our vices. Yours was beer, mine was lack of internet.
Your vice is dreadful.
Thank you. In other news, Man v Fat update.
Please.
Last night, hat-trick hero, yours truly, scored a hat-trick, not both on the pitch, but off the pitch as well.
What? Hang on, what do you mean?
Well, with Man v Fat Rugby, if you hit a milestone, you get awarded 3 tries on top of your score. And I hit the 10% milestone last night.
10%.
10
You haven't
pennies.
even got it cut out yet.
I know, I've still got a bit of me to be removed. So who knows where I'll get to. But yeah, that represents 10% less of me in the world. Not that it prevented me from scoring a hat-trick on the pitch as well. It was quite some spectacle. And you'll be shocked to know, Rory, I've cemented my position on the wing for this team. I am the pace man.
Wow. Well, listeners at home, I've mentioned it in the past. Once upon a time, David was regarded as the fastest man over 3 metres at Essex Rugby Club. So, you know, it's no surprise to me that he's made his way onto the wing, finally.
Finally, well deserved. So yeah, that's about as much information that is interesting about my week. And I think with that, mundane banter is complete. So, job done. Tick. Now, let's get on to the serious business. This podcast. What we talk about this week, Rory? Well, let me answer my own question. We're talking about the Gallagher Premiership. We're going to go through fixtures, talk about some of the themes, some of the stuff that goes on, went on, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Women's Six Nations, because, spoiler alert, a particular team that we expected to win the tournament may have gone and won the tournament. We'll confirm later on. Hold your horses, folks. We may hear from El Presidente of the DPRFR, and I think that will be a tasty little treat of a podcast. What do you say, Rory?
Sounds pretty good to me, David. I'm absolutely 100% behind you on all of the things that you've just suggested.
I'd be interested to know if you ever disagreed. Let's get started. Let's stop dancing around, not talk about rugby. Let's talk about rugby. And a real rarity, a Friday night Gallagher Premier fixture that didn't feature the Northampton Saints. Sale versus Saracens, Rory. What do you think?
I really enjoyed this game, I've got to say. I thought they all were phenomenal for the most part. They started like an absolute train. I loved the early scuffle, the early beef between Maro Itoje and Tom Curry. Yep. Love to know if there was a backstory to it or if they were just super amped up. But I like that. I like that England teammates can still have a bit of beef on this. And it was, you know, at one point it was looking like it might actually become proper
spillover
fisticuff.
Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed that. All round that, I thought this game was very entertaining. largely because of what Sale brought to it. Saracens actually probably, yeah, I think Saracens were by and large pretty disappointing, bar a couple of very notable exceptions we'll talk about. But Sale, there's a lot of players that you can talk up there, but really I just want to talk about George Ford and the form that he's in at the moment.
Well, normally I'd stop you from kind of going too quickly into a rabbit hole, but it does feel appropriate to go straight to George Ford after that performance this weekend. I thought it was really instrumental, and it is really telling that a fully flying, fully on form Ford is steering Sale one way up that table.
Yeah, I mean, he's just their difference maker, isn't he?
He is, absolutely. He's their talisman.
He was. Scored a really good try off the back of some very good work from Carpenter and particularly Roebuck, who had another brilliant game. But he just steers that ship so well. And the way that Sale team is made up of, I don't think it's unfair to say that is by and large a pretty direct Sale team in terms of the style of player.
That feels fair.
There's no criticism on that, but that's just the style of player they've largely cultivated. I think in the current style that's quite prevalent in the Premiership, where that works really well, and I would say that Bath have a similar makeup in a way, not quite so strict, but they're pretty direct when they want to be. But you've got to have a fly half that directs that directness in the right way. It's what Finn Russell does with Bath, and what Ford is doing with Sale. It looks to me, it matches up to the level of Finn Russell, actually, in terms of its effect on a game.
His influence, for sure.
He just runs that show, doesn't he?
He does, absolutely. Now, you mentioned Lions fever.
He's going up that league table at the moment, isn't he, in terms of the fly halves?
I think so. I think he's, personally, the way this form's going, he's certainly leapfrogged Marcus Smith in terms of in-form tens.
Yeah, that would have been my first point. Marcus, let's be frank, is having a real blip at the moment, and we'll talk about Quins a bit later on.
Yeah, I think we might.
But as you look at the other options around, Win Farrell's an interesting potential option. I know that there's reports that he's playing very well for Racing since his return, and I've seen some clips here and there that suggest that he is in some really good form there. Prendergast is obviously enjoying life as the lens to fly half. But who wouldn't? Finn Smith, probably of the English contingent, I would say still the most exciting option. That being said, if we assume that probably we're talking about the third choice fly half really in this contingent. If we're being honest, Finn Russell's top, and probably Prendergast is just going to be the second option. So if you're looking for someone who can steer a midweek team, influence training, influence standards, George Ford is a great shout for my money.
It's not a bad shout at all. And this game was quite the advert for him.
Yeah. It wasn't just the try he scored. It was just his decision making. He did not make a bad decision that entire game. The first try from Marcy White is absolutely instrumental in that. The Aaron Reid try, which we need to talk about because what a finish.
What a try. Was. Yeah.
But that comes from George Ford identifying from deep, which is not a very typical Sale decision, from deep in their own 22.
Yeah.
That it was on. Yeah. And he identifies that and he goes.
Yeah.
He's, at the moment, to an extent, the Premiership looks like a bit of a procession for Bath to win it because they are, by some distance, the best team across the whole season so far. But the only team that I look at and think it could match them, beat them on a day, on a one-off straight shot, Sale for me.
Yes, I think so. A note I put down, Rory, is are Sale becoming the new Saracens? Is Sanderson putting some of his stamp from his time at Saracens on this Sale side? Because, yes, what we spoke about here is a lot of really exciting rugby being steered by George Ford. But week in, week out, when I look at their numbers in statistical terms, their tackle numbers are so high. There's so many dominant, imposing tackles and hits. They seem to make a real point out of winning the physical side of things, which is kind of what Saracens was built on.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that is Sanderson's bread and butter, right? You know, he was a tough back rower himself. That's the kind of coach he's been. And, you know, he obviously came out of that really successful period for Saracens. And why wouldn't you try and replicate that? And I think it's been a development to get to this current point, maybe, although, you know, obviously they have reached another final in recent years. But that DNA is very, very obvious, and the squad has been really specifically designed to be an imposing physical side. And their commitment in defence, the hit on Tom Willis where he goes cartwheeling, you know, it's extraordinary, and they were just full of massive hits the whole game.
They were.
They're very much in that style. But perhaps with Ford at 10, given maybe that freedom to identify it when it's on more than Farrell was in that Saracens side.
Okay,
you know, so I would Saracens reined Farrell in.
Fair bit.
Maybe not until the last year or two of when he was at Saracens, but through that successful period, they were so process-driven. Farrell was the master at it. No criticism there whatsoever. Looks to me, though, that Ford is right now in the form that he's in. He's taken the shape of that attack, and he's got a bit more license to say, you know, yeah, we are what we are when it comes to style, but
we've got this added dimension.
Let's not, you know, negate the fact that we are still a really imposing attacking outfit too. But they've very much got that same style. But if anything, they could go on to better it from a stylistic standpoint, maybe not from a trophy standpoint. We'll see. Future time will tell.
Well, the time will tell. So obviously there's two teams in this fixture, and you just mentioned a name that I think is worth mentioning, Tom Willis. Last week, again, another example of us providing feedback to a player and then, you know, having an immediate reaction. Again, another almost one-man show.
Yeah, arguably the second best player on the pitch.
His numbers, he carried 126 metres, he beat 10 defenders, he won 2 turnovers, 18 carries, doing everything.
I would imagine those 126 metres
mostly had a Sale player on his back.
Mostly in contact, right? He didn't get any open pasture because the Sale defence just didn't give him that.
Yeah.
One of the things I noted watching him, you know, he's obviously a really big, imposing player. But I'm trying to think if I watched him when he was very young, you know, under 20s, sort of whether he was maybe a more gangly player in those days. Because his running style's very high knees, quite high elbows, quite high wide elbows. He's almost got, it's not an awkward running style, but it's the running style of a much more gangly player than what he actually is now. Yeah. You know, he's obviously now really, really solid. But what that means is when you go to tackle him, you've got a pretty good chance of getting a knee or an elbow as you have of getting him in the ribs. It just makes him so imposing to try and stop. You know, I mean...
Yeah. From memory, he was always kind of in the shadow of Jack Willis, and he was always kind of known as, I think at the time, he was like the same size, maybe smaller than Jack Willis, and Jack Willis is by no means a large chap. So I think perhaps he probably was a bit gangly, and he's beefed up a fair bit. Maybe from his brief stint in France, he realised he needed to beef up if he wanted to play in that 8 shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't say gangly as any kind of criticism, because I would say someone like Ebenezer is quite a gangly running style. Yeah.
Oh yes, I think Atoji's gangly in his style.
It just means high knees and high elbows. Just tackling them's just like, I'm going to get way more hurt than he is.
Yeah, there's too many acute angles going on.
Yeah, it's really, really. It's really exciting to watch.
Mm.
I look at him and I think that's the number 8 England have been crying out for a long time. Someone who can put a game on his shoulders physically and just batter down doors. If he can batter down a door as solid as the Sale defence, he's going to be effective in virtually every match. Yeah. And even if he's double marked out of the game, you know, that's what you want from those type of players to give you the space elsewhere. Yeah. So He's come on leaps and bounds this season in particular. He looks to me like, I don't think there is a better 8 in the league at the moment.
No, not at the moment, I don't think. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he goes on the Argentina tour, because he's not in Lions contention. He's going to be with England.
All right, probably. But
Okay.
Richard Wigglesworth, who's obviously one of the Lions coaches, was at that game on Friday night. Do you not think he'd be going to Andy Farrell? I think you should just take a second look. Just make sure you definitely don't want to take him before you don't take him.
Well, Wigglesworth convincing powers to Borthwick took about 2 years to convince him to pick him for England, so I don't know how quickly you can get him to convince Farrell to pick him for Lions.
Yeah, you might be right, but he looks to me like...
Albeit me saying last week he needed a rest, I'm still excited to see him operate this summer.
Yeah, 100%. Should we just chat briefly about that Aaron Reid try?
Yeah, let's. As two exponents of elusive electric running, I feel we are the best placed individuals in the world of rugby to discuss it.
My natural habitat is open prairie, but that's more as like sort of a grazing cattle.
Yeah, it's more as a bit like a game.
Yeah. No, it's such an extraordinary score. He turns Nick Tompkins inside out. Nick Tompkins. I thought his legs would have fallen off. He got spun around so quick. It's some of the most elusive running that I've seen in the Premiership ever. It's not the sort of try that you really often get to see from Premiership type wingers. Yeah, it's a sort of thing I would expect from Colby or Curtly Aarons. It's that type of running, and it was comically good.
One thing I will say for Aaron Reid, because I've been tracking stats for a few years now, I think he has a real strong case for being amongst wingers, maybe backs in general, as one of the most improved players in the league. Because back in 22-23, like his carrying statistics, like he was averaging like a metre a carry, which for a winger's abysmal. Now he's like in like 7, 8, 9 meters per carry, because like he's so much more effective, so much more elusive. He's able to find the space. He's in the right places. Like he's worked on his game so much, and he's got this speed where he is now able to really, really make defences pay. And it's really good to see if you're a Sale fan, and I think if you're a Scotland fan, you're starting to rub your hands as well.
Yeah, you'd be looking at him as a Scotland fan and thinking. They've got a good stable of wingers. It's not like they're short of back three players really in general. But you'd be looking at and going, he's one to keep as an option, isn't he?
Absolutely. Again, another summer tour option for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will just caution on this game. If I'm a Sale fan, I would just say, are they quite ruthless enough on the scoreboard? Because they were better than Saracens to the tune of a bonus point, but they didn't get one. Yeah. And they sort of take their foot off the pedal on about 60 minutes, or, the substitutions probably had a big lot to do with it, but it felt like they didn't press home a major advantage in this match. And it wasn't like Saracens massively improved and made it hard for them, to my mind. It just looked like they shut up shop a little bit and decided, no, that'll do for now. Which is potentially worrying, because actually if you go back to like the Toulouse game, when they were up at half-time, one of our Sanderson's assessments on it, from what he said on some of the comms, is they didn't then attack to defend, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
Keep going for the win to prevent the other team from coming back. And that's something that if, as and when they potentially get to a final against Bath, which, at this point looks the most likely final to my mind, that's something they'll need to not do.
Yes, Bath are an 80-minute team.
Bath are an 80-minute team, and they won't stop trying to win.
No.
So Sale were brilliant, and they're on a superb upward trajectory, and I think they'll make the final at this point. But that's the one thing that would give me a bit of pause.
Yeah, I think that's fair, because they were, 21-7 up after like 20-odd minutes? After they had a really quick start, then nothing really materialised from that. They, like you say, they just set up stall and stopped really.
Yeah, took a couple of shots at goal when actually.
Yeah, they could have gone for the bonus point.
Could have gone for the bonus point. So
yeah, but
that's if I was going to have any criticism at all of that Sale team, and it's a bit nitpicky probably, but
more ruthless.
It's just one where to say, look, if you want to win the league the way that it's being played at the moment, the way that other teams are playing, you cannot let up from an attacking point of view.
No. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, Rory. I think that's something. I think Sanderson will know this, and I think he will be keen to drive that message home. But it is one thing that I think they do need to focus on. But the game itself ended 25-7 to Sale. No bonus points here. Some outstanding performances from a few individuals. The next game, some really interesting talking points here. Bath versus Newcastle. And would you believe me, Rory, if I told you that the team at the lead at halftime wasn't the team that won when the final score was 55-19?
Well, I would, because I watched the game, but I
Good point.
appreciate the point you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to analyse this because for large parts of that game, Newcastle were really, really good, and they really should have got a bonus point. They had more than enough opportunities. It's really indicative of their season. It's hard to say whether they're not ruthless enough within 20. That's obviously going to be part of it. But as much as anything, they just don't have that little. We've spoken about it before. They don't have that little sprinkle of magic dust that takes tough opportunities that you need to take in the 22.
They don't. But I will say the Clark Doherty centre partnership, I'm liking more and more each week.
Well, Max Clark has really, really put his hand up and said, I am a Premiership level player. And he should, because he's 100% is. Should never have been a doubt, really. It's a good pickup by Newcastle. Sorry, but Newcastle have got this real problem where they can't press home pressure enough, and then they cough up tries. And with the news, if you look from that 23, Jamie Blamire obviously leaving. Max Pepper's leaving. They've announced that Ben Redshaw's not playing at the moment, but it's really, really promising talent. He's off to Gloucester, which is great from a Gloucester perspective. I'm thrilled to be signing him, but it's a really big talent that they're losing. It now looks like Callum Chick, who's maybe the most loyal man in rugby.
Yeah, I've said this often.
Finally decided that enough's enough, and sounds like he's off to Saints. And then you start thinking, how can they arrest the current predicament when you're losing that level of talent? We've spoken about potential ways for them to pick up talent, but the idea that we had in terms of doing those open trials things. So actually, I did have a bit of back and forth with Mark Smith, their media manager, who was saying they do a lot of scouting on that level. But what they're losing is the top end talent, and how much top end talent to that quality has slipped through the cracks to the point you can pick it up in the lower leagues, the Bucks leagues. Not a lot, realistically. You'd have to get very lucky to replace the likes of Jamie Blamire and Callum Chick.
Yeah.
From those levels. And do they have those kind of players coming through?
It's a hard one.
It's really difficult for them. And all I hope is that Steve Diamond sticks it out. I hope he does. I hope I think he's the kind of character who will see this as, this is a challenge. This is where I make my stand. I'm going to live and die by the success of Newcastle Falcons, and given enough time, eventually I do believe he'll get it right. But it doesn't look like they've got an easy couple more seasons after some really difficult ones in the most recent seasons.
Yeah, and I do think Callum Chick leaving is probably going to hurt more than the others if it does turn out to be true. Because he's the one that's stuck with them kind of through thick and thin for a long time now.
He was so good in this game. He was really
good.
He's
been consistently good for a long time. Long time.
Oh, he has. But in this game in particular, where you're up against that Bath defence, which is so physical again, it's so difficult to make any meters in contact. He was really the one who could consistently punch back and punch holes into it.
Yeah.
Once they've lost that kind of physicality, it's really difficult to see how they find another way around it. And on top of that, another red card, another.
Yeah.
It's a daft challenge. He should have he should have been able to pull out of that challenge and not put himself in that position.
Yeah.
I feel for Lou Brown. These collisions obviously do happen in the game, and red cards are somewhat inevitable, but you just look at it and you go, oh, could it not have happened to another team?
Yeah, come on, just give them a chance.
Yeah, it's like you're already in such dire straits there, and obviously Bath had 3 yellow cards, and actually Bath were down to 14 against Newcastle's 14 for large periods. Newcastle were the better team.
Oh, that's when they pressed home a couple of tries. Is in that period of
tries, but even when they weren't scoring tries, their continuity was really good. They'd eventually run out of numbers, and there'd be a turnover. That's just a perennial problem they've got at the moment. But their continuity was some of the best I've seen of them this season for a large part of this game. But then you just look on the other side, and then the guy on Premiership debut at 10, Kieran Donoghue.
Well, let's talk about him.
It's just, if you're a Newcastle fan and you're looking at going, yes, Finn Russell's not playing.
Yeah.
And then Kieran Donoghue, with the first thing he does in Premiership level rugby, scores an absolute wonder try and runs it from 70 metres in. And you go,
where have Bath been hiding him?
Well, he's been playing for Dings Crusaders in Nat 2.
Just round the corner from me.
Yeah. I think I've played against him.
Right.
Which is a
good claim.
Damning sign of where his career has been at the last few years. all of a sudden, he's come through, and he just looks. It's just wheels.
Yeah,
and he pulled the string all game.
I had to double take when I looked at the stats for this game, because obviously, as you know, that's always my first port of call. Statman Dave. And this game, 181 metres carried, 4 try assists, 13 defenders beaten. These are not normal numbers. Well, actually, this week it has been a little bit normal, because another player who you may be aware of also got 4 try assists. But a player on debut to be doing that, and the only thing is, I think he's Irish rather than English, so we can't get him on the hype train just yet.
I've looked into it a little bit. I read a little bit about him. So he's half English, half Irish.
Oh, there's hope.
Mum's Irish, dad's English. Dad was in Salisbury in the military academy thing. So he's born and raised in England, but with an Irish mother. So he's available for England. I don't think, no declaration has been made, because obviously up until this week,
hadn't heard of him.
He had a very good game against Poe in the Challenge Cup, but up until this week, he wasn't on anyone's radar for anything. And then all of a sudden, they've gone, oh Christ! What are we doing with this kid? How are we going to get him game time?
Yeah. So now, I'm not saying we should just give him a cap for the Argentina tour based off of one game. But if I was in Borthwick's kind of scout camp, is he now on my list of players to watch closely and see how they develop? He sure is.
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, obviously we've been opining about George Ford. George Ford's obviously 32, so you'd imagine post next World Cup, that's kind of maximum for him. Yeah. And then obviously you've got Ben and Marcus Smith, who are really good ages and aren't going anywhere, we hope. And then you look below that and you go, well, what are the 10 options for England?
Charlie Atkinson, Ben Cohen.
Atkinson. Yeah, Charlie Atkinson, I'll talk about Charlie Atkinson all day, but is he going to end up as top-level international quality? That's probably unlikely. I think he'll be very good Premiership quality, but I don't necessarily see that. Ben Cohen, we don't know, bit of an unknown at the moment, hopefully, but, it's obviously tough times down in Nexter. It's not like there's loads of other options knocking around. I know Bath have a youngster coming through below him who's...
Yes, James Lineker.
Lineker, who's very well rated. So you're not a load of names jumping out. So if you were Borthwick and you were going, well, who's not 18 that in a pinch I could call up into a squad if I needed to? He's probably rocketed himself pretty high in that list.
Yeah, just by default, off that performance alone. It was quite something. What a way to announce yourself as well with that try.
And then put in Quinn Rowe, put in Austin Emmons for 2, I think.
Yeah.
Superb debut. And, he'll be a bit of a marked man for his next game, I expect. But no one's going to give him that kind of space. But
true.
It's not a bad start.
Is it also quite a scary proposition that Bath are able to put 55 points on a dogged Newcastle with what is effectively their rookie backline, third choice. It's just showing off, really, again.
It is showing off, but that being said, Carl Smith at 9 is really highly rated, and I expect him to be challenging for the first team slot pretty soon. Obviously, we didn't know about, but he's going to be brilliant, so he's obviously already brilliant, so that's fine. Will Bath is a bit of the find of the season, or one of the shouts find of the season. He's been really good in that Bath side as a quite old school direct running. I said it quicker than I thought, actually.
Yeah.
Break early on in the game, quicker than I gave him credit for.
He's played on wing a couple of times this season as well, so he's got gas as well.
They got Cam Redpath, who's a Scotland international, and a very good player. Rory McConaughey is ex-England Sevens international and got lots of Premiership experience. And then Louis Hennessy and Austin Emmons have got wheels to burn. So, it might be a third choice backline at the moment. But
it's a pretty good one.
It's all brilliant players, yeah.
So let's touch on a little bit there. I think a challenge for Bath, as you know, we've always kind of opined about how they're making everything balance. But obviously they've signed Van der Linde for next year to be back up to Ben Spencer. You got Carl Smith, as you say, who's highly touted. How do they keep all these players?
Well, from the discussions I've had with Bath fans I know, a few and far between because I'm associated with them, but the ones I do know, I think there is a general acceptance that Finn Russell probably won't be there beyond the end of next season. They expect that to be when he moves on. Ben Spencer's, 32, 33? So you start thinking he's by no means done, but you're in the succession planning stage. Someone like Sam Underhill, he's not got the central contract with England. There's a lot of competition in that back row. Might start getting tempted by big money elsewhere in France. But if I was looking at it, and I wouldn't blame him, I'd be amazed if Thomas du Toit doesn't eventually get a massive pay bump from someone like Bordeaux. Bordeaux, I think, would be a great place for Thomas du Toit to play.
Imagine that.
To replace Big Benny Tamifuna. And there's still a big jigsaw of players there to fit in, but there's probably a bit of an acceptance that they've built a squad that's designed for turnover. And maybe it's just very clever succession planning because they got a lot of those players on quite cheap.
Are we not giving them the credit they deserve? If that's the plan, and if it's all timing perfectly, whoever's behind all that deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, Bruce Craig in his never-ending checkbook, maybe he's got it more or less right. How excited were you to see Tui Pelotu on the pitch?
Every opportunity I get to see a player who's spoken about so highly coming through the age grades and where they actually set foot in a Premiership game is like, this is the start of something special. I know he's played a couple of games this season. I just like how I could just see how abrasive he's going to be, how confrontational he's going to be. He's going to be really dynamic. I think he's a player that the position he plays in now, he's got a lot of maturing to do physically. And considering how much he already carries with dominance, I get very excited by the idea of it, Rory.
He was not afraid of a collision for the 30-odd minutes he was on the pitch.
No.
Some very dynamic carries and a few very dynamic tackles. Yeah, really excited, and I hope he does get the opportunities because they've got obviously Tom Dunn's there, Niall Annett, and Dan Frost is coming up from Exeter, I believe, for next season. So again, hopefully. But then, what is he, 18, 19?
He is 19 years old, yes.
So, as you say, it's a front rower. He's got a couple of years probably before he's a Premiership regular. But as long as they kind of manage him, keep him in the England conversations, take him to a few camps as a project player so he feels part of it, there's definitely something very exciting brewing there. He looks to me like someone who could well end up as being a very prototype shape for a hooker. He's quite square in all directions. But with that explosivity and the skill set he's got, I'd love to see him end up as a hooker. If you look into the future, you've got Theo Dan and him and someone like Nathan Jabulu.
Yeah.
Sort of competing for the future England hooker slot. All really big dynamic players. It's an exciting prospect for them.
So bored of talking so positively about Bath. Can we move on?
Yeah, please.
It's disgusting. Let's go on to Leicester versus Quins.
Oh, well, I can talk about this one because one of my pet projects is criticising Quins.
And I know how painful it is for you to be complimentary about Leicester, so this is a lose-lose for you.
Yeah, so I will be slightly complimentary about Leicester. I've said on a few podcasts that I didn't really know what I thought about that team. I didn't really know whether they had the kind of expansive game to go to push on, and I still think there is a question around that because I think their forward play is still one out. I don't think it's very much deception. I don't think there's a lot of link play going on. That being said, Radwan scored
A hat-trick.
and Hassel Collins scored 2 tries in this one.
Yeah.
If they can find a way to utilise the number of very good backs they do have more effectively, get the ball wide more often and into the hands of those types of players, there's a bigger ceiling to this Tigers team than maybe I've given it credit for up to this point.
Yes, I agree. I think the key man is Van Portfleet. When the call is made for them to go out, his distribution and his vision comes to the fore. But I agree, when there seems to be nothing coming, and maybe this is Pollard's style, maybe he just doesn't communicate it, it does look very one out. And obviously Van Portfleet has his role in that, where it's just shipping on to the next forward, chundering on. But when the call is to go out, it's lightning fast, it's accurate, it's great distribution, and he often is the spark for when something good goes on for Leicester.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's the difference maker for them. But before I praise Tigers too much, what I will say is I think one of the reasons that their wingers were able to score so many tries as well was Quinn's made it so easy for them.
Well, it doesn't help when, again, maybe the flip side of us sometimes giving individuals praise on this podcast is then the following week they don't quite follow up with a similarly great performance. I think Anderson didn't have the best of days in a Quinn shirt.
No, not all round. To get red carded while you're basically dead on the pitch is not an ideal.
Just for a listener's sake, he hasn't died.
No, he just looked it. He didn't move for quite some time.
He was out of it.
It was quite concerning. It was a really bad knockout, but entirely of his own making. And the second time he'd done it, he'd already got himself yellowed for it once for doing exactly the same thing. It's just daft.
Absolutely.
And then Tyrone Green gets himself sin-binned for slapping the ball down, basically 2 minutes afterwards. And even before that, they weren't defending out wide very well anyway.
Way too narrow.
Radwan's first try was so easy for them to get round their defence. A bad Pollard pass putting Northmore in aside, did Quinn's offer in this game? Because their breakdown work's really good. That's the only thing. That's the only positive I can give them. Now, I will say, Kenningham, Jack Walker, Don Brandt, Oscar Beard, they all made at least one really good turnover. Their breakdown work's really good. Their set piece work is dreadful. The scrum is falling apart, and it's not actually Finn Baxter. It's on the other side, I'm afraid. Finn Baxter's doing quite a manful job in a losing cause there. The line-out's crap. That's fallen apart. And Marcus Smith picked up a knock quite early on, and he was clearly struggling with it throughout the game. But even without that, he's just looked shot, and he's not helped by the fact that he's got a pack that doesn't even really compete in the fight really at the moment. You can be deficient power-wise, but be scrappy and not give it up. But they're not even really fighting for it at the moment.
Can the end of the season come quick enough for them? That's how it feels.
Well, they're in a real side. They now drop below Saints in the table.
And that's something.
They've had a pretty dreadful season themselves.
By their standards.
But Quinn's, I looked through that team and there's some standout players, but there's too many passengers in that team at the moment. And I'm not going to name names on it because that's unkind, but they've made a real mess of their recruitment in the last couple of seasons, I think.
They've not replaced the key cogs that have left, have they?
They've not replaced key cogs, and they've not built depth in positions. Well, scrum half, Galtima had a torrid game. And Murray, when he came on right at the end, dropped the ball, and you just think, God, when it's not going for you. They've completely fallen away. There are some standout players. Kenningham's had a really good season. Cunningham South, he's developed really well. Northmore's a bit up and down, but when he's good, he's really good. Oscar Beard, when they can get him into the game, he's good, but they're not getting into the game.
He does seem to have dropped off a little bit.
Which is the ball.
Obviously, they've got Waghorn this year. That's a bit of a plus point who's come through.
Waghorn's come through. We're clutching the straws a little bit.
We are. And we're talking about all these names because there's literally nothing good to talk about from this game from a Quinn's perspective.
I don't know how they arrest the slide. I don't.
I think the end of the season's how you rest the slide. I'm
the
not sure.
noise around the coaching side of things is getting quite loud from the fans. A lot of fans have lost real faith there. Obviously, Billy Millard's off to Connaught.
I think people are getting a bit tired of Danny Wilson.
They got a rebuild job on, and
I'm not sure if they're running, but do they get another win?
Well, they got Gloss at Twickenham in the next game.
So,
and then I was looking at it. I think they get one more win. I was trying to work out what I thought the final table was. I think they've got Chiefs. They've got either Chiefs or Falcons. They've maybe got one more win. But
where they're playing,
realistically for me, the way I was trying to work out what I thought the final table would look like. And they're 8th now, and they're 8th at the end of the season.
So there you go, Quins fans. You're finishing 8th. Was there anything else Leicester Tigers-wise that you wanted to cover? I know it pains you.
I do want to talk about Mika Leone.
Well, please do.
He's really starting to develop into an interesting player, isn't he?
I want him to become a starter.
He's doing a medical degree, so he's got another year on that. But physically, he's tall, he's rangy, he's flexible. His turnover works really good. For someone his size, he's really flexible around the breakdown. But he's starting to impose himself on games in a way that I remember him at under-20s level. He was very imposing at under-20s level, but he hadn't looked like he'd made the jump into men's to me over the last couple of seasons.
I think he's suffered from being part of Leicester Tigers Academy, where in the back row they've just very rarely afforded opportunities.
He's probably not had the opportunity over the last couple of years. That's probably fair. But I did watch it on that game, and I thought, this is someone who's going to be very interesting to watch over the next 2 or 3 years. I don't know whether he steps up to international. There's a lot of competition there. But someone that tall and quick as a potential option in a back row,
I think he's got potential for it.
He's going to be worth keeping an eye on, because I thought he was really good when he came on. I thought Freddie Stewart had another really good game as well. His form hasn't dipped. He really is a standout Premiership player. And the last thing I just wanted to highlight, because it's us, just a nice little moment of Dan Cole hoofing the ball off.
It's poetic.
It's glorious.
It's glorious.
I thought a really good performance by Leicester, significantly helped by a really poor performance by Quins. So I look at Tigers and I don't think they're the finished product. I think a lot of the right ingredients are there, but I don't think they're playing to a level that gets them to the next bit.
Not yet.
Although I suspect they'll make the playoffs, probably 4th.
Probably. That'll be interesting. It's interesting to see what goes on with Leicester. Obviously, the question marks over their coach for next year is still up in the air. That you can see that in their recruitment. They've not brought anyone in yet. They've just got leavers, nothing coming in really confirmed. Even the Blamire transfer is not officially confirmed yet, although everyone knows that's happening. But the game itself did 47 to Leicester. Harlequins 1 intercept away from being nilled once more. But let's get on to another game that I feel quite comfortable to talk about.
Should I just pop off and
pop the kettle on?
Yeah, go on, please.
Simply put, Northampton Saints have decided to start showing everyone why they were the champions last year. And this is in no small part by the fact that this is maybe the 3rd, 4th time that Alex Mitchell and Finn Smith this season have played together. I know I've said in the past that I don't want to blame injuries for things, but I think we're starting to see what a Saints team can do when their players are fit and firing. And we can undo and outgun the great entertainers of the league. Bristol, who notoriously have been able to travel away from home and turn on style in ways that need to be seen to be believed. And they were absolutely outgunned and outmuscled by a Northampton team that were, for me, looking like every bit a team that is aiming to peak at just the right time for what is the game of their season. That's coming up this weekend. As I speak, Rory is falling asleep. He's got his head in his hand and his eyes are shut. Sorry. Bear in mind, Rory, of the game after this game we're going to be assessing, you have to be fair.
Yeah, it's the one that's actually worth talking about,
Yeah. But I suppose the fair challenge, and I think it may be perhaps more so worth talking about, is have Bristol been found out?
Well, they've fallen apart pensively, because they've got that definition of madness thing, just trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. At some point, someone's got to go, that the offloading game is great, if it's on, but someone's got to
stop forcing it.
Sit them down and go, it's not always on. It's funnily enough, and this is the smallest level of criticism that I'm going to throw at Henry Pollock at the moment, because he's almost beyond reproach, and he still scored a try. It was fairly enough with a lovely swallow dive to finish it.
Yeah, as always.
This game will be one for him to reflect on and go, if I'm going to be the best player in the world, if that's the kind of trajectory that he's looking to make, picking and choosing his moments, picking and choosing the right skill at the right time is probably the thing. And that's an experience thing, right? He's still obviously so young. But more than one occasion, trying the flash pass when the simpler option was available cost, and in a tighter game would potentially have cost Saints.
It's not the first time this season that he's been guilty of that. As we remember, like the penalty against Leicester where he just touched and went and got turned over and Leicester scored. I think there was another time where he just touched and went in a really inappropriate point in the game. So I think that's a fair criticism of Henry Pollock. I'm sure he's aware of that himself, but also there's been times where he's done that and it's been a difference maker and it's led to something great.
Yeah, of course. Execution is the key thing, right? That the difference between the good and the great players is executing hard skills under maximum pressure. Yeah. And you probably only get good at that by trying to do it on repeat occasions. So, and I'm not saying don't do that. I am saying is making the decision to do the simpler skill at the right time when you've got the option to do either the simple skill or the hard skill. Both result in a try. Do the simple skill, get the try. That experience thing, and that is a very short into men's rugby thing. So it's not real criticism. It's just that's one of the things that someone will at some point pull him aside and go, right, this is how we think you get better. But from a Saints perspective, for once, actually, this wasn't the Henry Pollock show. This was the Alex Mitchell show.
I agree.
How good was
he? He was so good, and I was so glad that Easterby was in the stands watching him, hopefully with his notebook, with a little name on it written, Alex Mitchell, underlined, Lions 9, yes. I want him on that tour. I'm not saying he's going to start the test game, but I want him on that tour. Is there a better 9 to take off the bench at the Lions to take over from Gibson Park, as an example? I don't think there is one. The way he's coming into form is excellent. It's shown how much we've missed him when he's had this injury at various points through the season, and he's looking like he's getting back to his very best.
He looked like he was having fun. And Saints were very good in this game. Bristol just couldn't slow them down. Their breakdown work was phenomenal, and in no small part because Mitchell's ability to pick it up and go and make a good passing decision afterwards from each ruck was phenomenal.
The speed of thought is impressive.
It's right up there. Bristol, their season's falling apart, I think.
It does feel that way.
Unless they turn this around really quickly, I look at them and that's a team not making the playoffs at this point. They look a bit directionless, actually. And leadership core, this Genge, who you want to talk about later on, you can see that he's trying to be the guy to put the team on his back and carry them forward. But it's not enough from one man. And actually, he's one of too many players who end up doing almost too much and putting the rest of the team in a bit of trouble. You may have looked at the stats. Be interested to know how many turnovers Saints got throughout this game, either from knock-ons or just straight up strips from rucks.
They 10 actual turnovers, but Bristol's conceded turnovers, so this includes strips as conceded. 21 times they lost possession of the ball.
See, that's rubbish. I'm sorry, that is just rubbish from a top-level team. You can't win games playing like that. And what they need to do is look at players like McGinty, Janssen van Rensburg, and Rich Lane, who, by the way, I think is the Moneyball signing of the season, right? And he's been brilliant.
Well,
and I thought
he's been there for a couple of years, but I get your point.
Sorry, like he's such a Moneyball signing that it came. I think it was
very underrated.
Yeah, was it? Yeah, but to come in and replace Max Malins the way he has in that team, he's one of the few players that provides a bit of solidity and a bit of decision making. Too many of those players they're just daft. I don't know how else to describe it, really.
It's just a load of daft bears.
Yeah, big daft bears.
Big daft bears.
There's some really exciting players. I'm really excited by Diego Bailey.
He looks
like a specimen.
He looks like one to watch.
I don't have much positive to say about Bristol. I know they scored a few tries late on in the game.
But let's face it, this was at a point where Northampton started taking players off to protect them for next weekend.
Absolutely. Ibatoy, some extraordinary things, but the try they scored off maybe the worst chip and chase I've ever seen was pretty good. But if you want to look at what really sums up where Bristol are at the moment, the Manny Uogan try for me just summed it up. Slow ball in their own 22 when any other team in the league goes, right, it's not, we just got to kick it away and reset. And they play off slow ball, they mess up the skills and spill the ball, and then Uogan just trundles over for a metre and a half score.
Easiest try he'll ever score.
Yeah. The stuff that props dream of. Nah, it's just terrible. And honestly, it's a coaching issue. Any other coach in the league, I think, would have reined this in a little bit, at least enough. I know Pat Lamb's if it's on, very positive. I really respect that about the way that he sees the game. But even he must be looking at that going, why are we constantly trying to play Fiji Sevens rugby in Premiership 15s?
For a side that famously passes the ball 1,000 times every training session, they don't half drop it a lot.
It's because it's not actually the skill sets look that good a lot of the time. They do occasionally. Ravuvu last week with that round the back offload to Ibatoy. They have that in the locker, but then equally the number of balls that are just just get dropped, and then it's just like, well, you can't win a game playing like that. I'm sorry.
No. It's very hard to play when you're constantly just gifting the other side that immediate attacking kind of opportunity, and when you're playing a team like Northampton, they will take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
From a Northampton perspective, it's just been the perfect setup for what is the biggest game of the season for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then maybe, I'll give you a couple of minutes to maybe talk about what you're hoping to see next weekend, or what you're realistically expecting from a Northampton side, what you're hoping at the top end, where you actually think things will shake out.
My hope is that Northampton give Leinster a real tough fixture. I'm bored of this narrative of teams turning up to the Aviva and Leinster going and nilling them or just running up a cricket score. I want Northampton to turn up and make it a competition to show that there are other teams out there who can match them on the day, because I think they're capable of that. I think they've got it in them to match Leinster in various elements and parts of the pitch. Realistically, I know it is unlikely that Northampton go there and come away with a victory. Is it impossible? No. My concern is obviously in the pack. Northampton's pack is lightweight in comparison, partly by design, by the way Northampton like to play. So I think if Northampton wants to achieve anything, they need to come out of those changing rooms, not 110%, at about 150%. They need to be flying, and they need to catch Leinster cold and put some early points on the board to keep that crowd quiet and put the pressure on them. Because when the pressure's on, let's see how Leinster react, because they don't often operate in that manner. And I think what's really telling, and this is in no way a criticism of Leinster at all in any way, shape or form, but in the
of course, we wouldn't dream of that.
In the URC, they could afford to put out a 4th, 5th string team to go and lose against the Scarlets, because, it's fine. They don't really care. Where Northampton are having to play all of their best players because there isn't the depth available to be able to do that. So
well done Leicester for building a squad in order to do that.
Absolutely. No criticism of it whatsoever. But I have to acknowledge the fact that team is going to be incredibly fresh off of a very intricately designed system that doesn't favour anyone in any particular way. And Northampton, who are going to be very battle-hardened, meters in the legs, but I'm hoping packed full of momentum, because they are peaking at just the right point.
Any news on injuries?
Tom Pearson's out for the season, I've heard. Hendy's out for the season. I think the likely backline is probably what you saw against Bristol. I'm hoping Dingwall's going to be fine. Dahl, I don't have.
Hutchinson, Dingwall, do you think that's your first choice centre partnership?
I think that's what it's going to be, because I'm not sure on Odendahl.
Right, okay, fair enough. And so Tom Pearson's a loss, but actually I do think your back row options are pretty good. I like Kemeny, I like Scott Young. You've got obviously Pollock, you've got Augustus. Coles can obviously slot in there. So maybe it's not ideal, but it's not necessarily the worst thing to wear.
No.
I think the worry is scrum time for me. Probably maul time, scrum and maul. And if Leinster decide to just go full route one, we'll just maul them out the game.
Yeah, that's my worry. I think if Leinster get the positions, this is where discipline is going to be so important for Northampton, to not give them those penalties to go kick to those corners that easily. I think that is an area we will definitely struggle, and we struggled with it all season. We used to have players who are just absolute experts at stopping those. Courtney Laws was probably the best in the world at getting through a maul and stopping at a source. We don't have that at the moment, and it is a bit of a weakness. But I'm still hopeful we will make it a contest, and I just hope it's not another Champions Cup fixture that's decided by the half-time whistle already. That's my main hope.
Well, it's a semi-final. It's a straight shot. It's, the season hinges on it. If you can't get the team emotionally ready for a game like that, then you're not a top-level coach, and I don't believe that of the Saints coach staff. I rate that coaching team. So all that put together, I foresee a tough contest that is not decided by a gulf in points. Best one in the world, you have to back Leinster to win the game.
That's where the smart money is.
But in a straight shot, if you said to me, you can either put a tenner on Leinster at, 5-2 odds on to win this one, or you can take a punt on Saints at 8-1, whatever the odds are. It's not out of the question.
No.
I think they're worth a punt to say Saints could go and upset things.
That's the game. That ended, score-wise, 48-31 to Bristol. So another high-scoring game. It's been a real round of high-scoring games. And that was a perfectly designed segue into the next fixture, where I think it was a little bit high-scoring. And this time I'm going to go make a cup of tea and let Rory talk for hopefully no longer than 30 hours about Gloucester versus Exeter. Over to you, Rory.
Yeah, well, I am going to try and restrain myself a little on waxing lyrical about Gloucester. 79-17, it's beyond a drubbing. We got hammered by your lads last year at Franklin Gardens 90-0, which was about as bad a day as it's ever been for Gloucester. But we sent the Shags to make sure we got to a European final, which we did. But that doesn't stop that scoreline being hard to take. Chiefs sent their strongest side to King's Own and were shredded in all facets of the pitch. George Skivington mentioned it before and after the game. There was a hurt pride on Gloucester's pack work in recent weeks against Sarries and Bath in the league and in Europe. And the fact that we've been dismantled up front is a real point of pain, particularly for someone like George Skivington, who really prides himself on coaching in those areas. So for us to go and score, I'm trying to think, 5 maul tries. Clement, Seb Blake and the Singleton hat-trick all came off mauls. And ultimately, the pack not only dominated up front at scrum time, at line-out time, at maul time, they also were able to play the running game as well. So some really sharp interplay between the forwards. Freddie Thomas, Freddie Clark, Arthur Clark was great in this game, looking like a seasoned pro rather than effectively a rookie player. Giving it the big one to Daffydd Jenkins, Ruan Ackerman giving it the big one to Daffydd Jenkins, Lewis Ludlow just being Lewis Ludlow, just smashing everything, getting himself a try, being everywhere. They talked about afterwards that they'd heard that someone in the Exeter camp had claimed that they were soft, and they came out fired up for this one. There's to a man were good across the pitch. To a man they were good. But I guess similarly to Northampton and to Tigers, vastly helped by a Chiefs side that within 20 minutes had thrown the towel in. And I don't say that actually with any great joy. It's not really something that's very enjoyable to watch. A team that just throws up their hands. And it's a harsh thing to say about a pro team who will obviously pride themselves on their own standards, but whatever standards they turned up with, they did not apply. Maybe Josh Hodge came away with a bit of credit.
Will Rigg
when he came on, that's a very fair shout. Hayden Wood possibly as well. I think those guys came off the pitch. Those guys can come off the pitch and say they did bits and they applied themselves in that game. The rest of that team, long hard look in the mirror, and we'll talk about the fallout in a minute because I do want to talk about that specifically. But to be so uncompetitive in a game when you've sent your first team is just
Not quite
unacceptable. I don't want to take anything away from Gloucester, obviously, but also there are things that are really important from a Gloucester, from in terms of their development. There was a concern after Saracens and after Bath that the season could peter out, whereas after that performance, as
real
a
shot in the arm.
It's a shot in the arm, and then you're saying, right, we can absolutely go to Twickenham and beat Quins. We can absolutely go to Kingston Park and beat Newcastle. We can absolutely have Northampton at Kingsholm at the last game of the season, secure that playoff spot. There's 15 points to play for, and playing like that, they'll be thinking 15 out of 15, last 3 games. Let's just go for it and make sure we get into the playoffs. And I do believe we will. I'm now believing that that is a playoff team. Whether we get to the final, whether we lift the trophy, those are all questions further down the pitch, and you don't dare to dream sometimes as a Gloucester fan. But the turnaround in this side from last season to this season is remarkable. And then you start thinking about the players we've signed and are rumoured to sign, and you start getting quite excited about where we're going.
Definitely feels like a club on the up for sure.
Ross Byrne, Will Joseph, Ben Redshaw, Ben Loader, enter in the back row. Obviously, Santi Carreras leaving is a bit of a body blow for us, and he was fantastic in this game.
4 try assists.
4 try assists, and again, he's just consistently so fantastic throughout the season. Looks like Chris Harris probably won't be there next season, and if anyone's looking for a Moneyball signing, pick up Chris Harris, because he's been as good this season as he's been ever in his career, actually.
Yeah, really solid.
He looks like the player that made a Lions tour right now. Scored a try, but it's not actually the try scoring with Chris Harris, because actually you don't actually pick Chris Harris for the try scoring, you pick him for his defensive work.
Yeah.
All-round attacking work has been brilliant, really knits that back line together. But you start thinking about, all right, there's a bit of turnover, but some really good players coming in. There's a good feel about the place. You know, we've announced a new shirt sponsor that's bringing in some big heritage things. So we're going to be on Macron, which they do a lot of rugby shirts. They're talking about some of the stuff on the heritage thing. There's some really good stuff going on with the stadium and the way they're monetising that. Women's team, so he won the PWR again. It's something, well, as a club, whatever they're doing is working really well, because at the moment it's a real feel-good factor. And now let's put that into very sharp contrast to how things are at Sandy Park. I presume you've seen the video of Tony Rowe.
What are your thoughts on Tony Rowe entering the changing room, lambasting aside? What are your thoughts on that?
I think Bob Baxter not grabbing him by the collar and the belt and throwing him into the hallway is a failure of player management. Allowing an owner to come in and castigate players like that. He's not a professional rugby player. He's not a coach. He's an owner. He's a money man. Fine, you know, all right, he's the ultimate boss, and he's made some decisions on coaching in the days since, putting Rob Hunter and Ali Heifer on gardening leave, which...
Way to reward their loyalty.
But he's got that prerogative. Outside from a business and a personnel perspective, he's got that prerogative to make decisions and make tough, decisive decisions. Fair enough, he's the owner. He pumped the money in. He is not a rugby man. He's not a coach. He's not a player. He has got no business being in that changing room. And the fact that they let him do it is a failure from Rob Baxter, who, if I'm being honest, I'm starting to feel like I'm going a bit mad that no one seems to be asking the question about what the job that Rob Baxter's done in the last few years here. Now, I appreciate he is Exeter Rugby. Mm-hmm. They've won titles. They've won European Cups. The man has got a CV to stand on when it comes to the achievements he's made with Exeter Rugby. But they've been on the downward trajectory for a few seasons now. And this season has been beyond appalling for them. This game was beyond appalling. Where are the questions about their recruitment? The fact that they struggle so much at halfback. The fact that they can't compete up front. You know, where are the questions about the fact that they've had to make 2 mid-season coaching changes because for whatever reason they've decided the coaching lineup doesn't work? Ali Heifer starts the season as head coach, then Rob Hunter comes in, and then by the end of the season they're both on gardening leave, presumably going to be leaving, because would you stay around to work for Tony Rowe after that?
Well, put someone on gardening leave if you're not planning on letting them go.
Exactly. those are the things that Rob Baxter, as director of rugby, is ultimately responsible for. If this is a team that's struggling and not improving, the buck has to stop with him ultimately. And no one's asking these questions about what kind of job is he doing at the moment. And you can throw as many mitigating factors in terms of finances and financial problems as you like. But Gloucester and Exeter are similar sized clubs, similar sized towns, similar finances. Exeter's probably a wealthier area, actually, frankly, rather than as opposed to Gloucester. And Gloucester have had some very difficult seasons in recent times, but are on an upward trajectory. But there were real questions about Skivington from fans and media. And there was a real question at the end of the last season as to whether he was going to stay on.
Yeah.
Very nearly didn't, I suspect. Where are the questions on Rob Baxter at this point?
It does seem to be Teflon coated.
Well, because he's good on mid-game comms with the commentary side.
That does seem to be a real big plus.
That's literally, that seems to be it. Because the commentators like him. No one asked the question about whether he's actually doing a good job at the moment. And frankly, not booting Tony Rowe from that changing room, for me, as a player, would be the nail in the coffin as to whether I still believed in Rob Baxter. And if I were Len Ikitau right now, or Joseph Dweber, coming into that environment, having seen an owner do that, I would be
checking the small print.
I would be asking some questions about that setup. From my perspective, this has been as shameful an episode in terms of a club's image. I'm trying to think. Bloodgate? In terms of the image, in terms of what it says about them as a club.
Yeah, I get the point.
Or maybe the Saracens scandal. But to my mind, from someone who's played rugby a long time and has had more stick from fans than praise, just because it's that kind of level, and I'm that kind of level. If I was in a changing room at Westcliff and the president of the club, who'd never played, say when we were in National 2 and we'd been thumped, as we often were at National 2, if the president of the club had come in and started giving out to us and go, well, who are you? You played 30 years ago in like Essex Merit Leagues when the club was nowhere. Who are you to tell me about what it's like to play at this level? Times that by however much, what the sacrifices it takes to be a professional athlete in anything, let alone professional rugby, and the physical toll that takes, the toll on any game could be your last game if it was a bad enough injury. It's not like the world's most well-paid profession. And then some bloke who's made a few quid comes into the changing room and tells you...
Throws his toys out the pram, quite literally.
Questions you as a human. No. No. For me, if I were a Chiefs player, I would be ringing my agent, personally. I wouldn't want to play for them again.
It'll be really interesting to see the reaction from that moment in the squad, whether Baxter has an ability to get the team's buy-in off the back of that to try and end the season with some positives.
Why would you trust Baxter at this point?
That's the question. It's how much credit in the bank does Baxter have with these players? Because it certainly will be taking up any credit he does have to get them back on side.
Well, he shafted Ali Heffer once, taking the head coach away from him. Now he's let them shaft Ali Heffer a second time and Rob Hunter and put them on gardening leave. He shafted the whole playing squad by letting Tony Rowe come in and shame them and not even so much as criticising him for that.
It will be really interesting to see what happens. Whether Exeter just choose to down tools and really stop trying, which they've been accused of doing, I'm assuming, by Tony Rowe.
Well, look, don't get me wrong. It was an unacceptable performance. Of course it was. Anyone can see that. Anyone who watched that game can see it was an unacceptable performance. But it is not for the bloke who writes the checks, who's never played the game, to come in and tell them that. That's a coaching job. Yeah,
it's a coaching decision, and it's a coach's job.
Do you know what? Even if he'd come out, he'd done an interview in the press and said, it's unacceptable, we apologise to fans. That's an unacceptable performance. We do not accept it in this club. That would have been okay.
Yes, the images,
Changing room, as a player, the changing room is virtually a sacred space. That is not for him to be in there and do that. So, for me, I'm a big anti anyone praising Tony Rowe for that. If anyone's praised that, they need their head wobbling.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's praising it, they've not been in rugby or don't work in rugby or...
You haven't played. It gives off people who say like, game's gone soft vibes. What kind of level have you played at? You don't know what these players go through. Actually understand what these players go through. I've got an inkling of it, and I'm nowhere near that level. You don't get to tell players that they aren't putting their bodies on the line.
No.
Even if you think they're not. You don't get. You don't have.
It's not your place. Not your place.
Not in the change room.
No, absolutely.
In the pub, maybe in the press if you're the owner, but not in the change room.
Have you got that out of your system now, Rory?
Yeah, no, that's quite cathartic. I was really carrying that the last couple of days.
That's good. I'm glad you feel like you've got that bit of release. Do you want to talk something a bit more positive?
Please.
Let's talk about the Red Roses.
Oh, well, let's talk about the Red Roses. Maybe got out of jail a little bit on the Grand Slam.
Yeah, well, it's nice that...
Maybe, but they gave away some daft tries. I think there will be some reflections on how that result happened. But Grand Slams shouldn't be easy to come by. They shouldn't come by without any kind of fraught opposition. And France provided a seriously stern test. And, France are a good side, as we've spoken about.
Yeah.
But it's a Grand Slam, and you can't take that away from them.
You can't take it away from them. It's a Grand Slam win. It is massive. Do you know what is the sad thing?
Go on.
The media coverage of a national team winning a Grand Slam has been next to nothing. In a World Cup year that's being hosted in this country.
Well, the game was well attended. It was
40,000? Was it
40,000. That's pretty good. It was played, it was an exciting game to have that many points scored on both sides. I guess this is a cross rugby. You've spoken enough about rugby markets itself, and actually I'm pretty positive about how the women's game generally markets itself. And for a variety of reasons, it's hard for women's rugby to break through the noise in some ways.
Yeah.
And in a lot of media outlets. But I suppose this is probably one where you go, right, well, where's the RFU? Where's the Six Nations organisation? How is this not making bigger waves in the media? It's not got the attention it deserves. That being said, I think things are still building quite nicely towards the World Cup. I do think that will get a good showing. I still believe that at the moment. I still believe this is going to be a really good tournament. So I'm really looking forward to that.
And maybe this close result, nearly losing it to France, maybe that's just the reminder to England that if they take their eye off the prize at all, they can be as little as a point away from losing something. So they can't rest on their laurels and take it easy. I'm saying they did against France, but it shows how close it can be.
Well, I think if we're being hypercritical, and actually if you're Grand Slam champions, you should be able to take a bit of hypercriticism, I guess. They scored tries off, there's the Holly Aitchison knocking it on over the line, spilling it into, poor skill. It was poor pass from Lucy Packer, I think it was at that point. It's poor skills from Holly Aitchison, because whilst it was a poor pass, it was grabbable. And then Arbe and I think Bourgeois both scored tries that were really preventable, but really poor tackling from England in the back three from Abidal and Emma Singh, who had really good games going forward.
Yeah.
But we'll probably have it reminded to them that they need to be good both sides of the ball if they want to maintain a place in that starting lineup for the World Cup. If you're Emma Singh, you go, Lee Kildan, you got Jess Breach. It's going to be a tough job for her to get a lot of game time in the World Cup. Can't afford to be missing tackles two or three times in that game where she missed a poor tackle that led to a try. But all credit to France, because they struggled up front against the England power for quite large parts of that game, but sort of turned that around towards the end of the game and started getting parity, maybe a bit the upper hand at scrum time. And they made the most out of their most dangerous players. RB, Bourgeois, Nager, Bourdon all scoring. Arbez scoring a really good try as well. And it's all their backs scored virtually. I think it's all the starting backs, in fact, isn't it? It is, the whole backline scored a try apart from Vernier.
Yeah.
So that's playing to your strengths, and that's utilising where you're good, and actually probably a sign to England that, all right, you've won the Grand Slam, but you are not totally dominant. So that's something to reflect on. Yeah. It's good to come out of a win with questions.
Yeah. You learn more from these sorts of games than you do a 50-point drubbing. They'll take lots from it.
we've been very charitable about some of the other games, but England haven't been that tested in some of the other matches, and they came through their
biggest test
and won it in not only the biggest test in terms of the quality of the opposition, their biggest test in the fact that a title and a Grand Slam were on the line. So
when it matters,
all credit to them. That's clutch, but lessons to learn from it.
So if you were to reflect on the tournament, Rory, what players have impressed you the most?
Well, from a France perspective, the two Felius and Bourdon and Arbez, the France halfbacks, I thought have been really good. Ménager in the centres. So I think they've got some very exciting players there who will, I think, drive them on quite high. Aoife Waffer for Ireland, who missed this week, which might go some way to explaining their result against Scotland. Neve Jones has been really good. Costigan, Jugang. They've got some really good players coming through. I think Ireland are very much on the up. Scotland's been a pretty tough tournament, I think, for them. But McGee...
Some of their backs have really stood out.
Some of their backs
and
have stood up.
Evie Gallagher's looked good, bar you getting the red card she got. But she's always looked pretty handy in the back row for Scotland.
Stefan for Italy. I think she's been really impressive, actually.
And back row, is it Scorbini?
Scorbini, she's been very good as well. I think Italy are very much on the up, so they've got a lot to build upon from where they are. Wales, it's a bit tougher to find positives at the moment for them. I think for Wales, what I will say is, given a really tough training camp over the summer in preparation for the World Cup, I think the players are better than what they've shown here. Yep. But if I was Sean Lynn, I would be saying the fitness standards are nowhere near high enough at the moment because they fall away in the second half dramatically. And some of it's a strength in depth thing, some of it's a fitness thing. And I know Wales fans have come out this pretty frustrated this tournament, which understandably. But I think they've got an opportunity in the summer to accelerate some development there. And then I guess finally with England, Fayanati I think has been very impressive. I won't talk about all the really established names because they're well documented. Fayanati I think has really shown well. I've been very impressed by Claudia McDonald the last couple of weeks. Abby Dow continues to impress. Lucy Packer, the 9, notwithstanding a couple of errors here and there, but
you can
in terms of her pace and tempo, I think it's a really exciting option to have with Mo Hunt kind of steering the ship and then Lucy Packer to come on and inject a bit of pace. So
that feels like the right balance.
Lots of things for England to build upon. I think they've done well to build a squad.
I think they've shown the depth they've got this tournament, and they've really given a lot of players a bit of game time that's going to be really useful for them.
And I expect John Mitchell over the summer warm-ups going into maybe some of the early rounds of the tournament, depending on if you need to look at their fixtures. They actually got quite a hard group, but to hone in on a really strong first 15, which all things being well, and I'm really hopeful, and I do believe that we'll win the World Cup this year. I'm backing them. Although
Black Ferns got Portia Woodman coming back, which helps them. But yes, I still back England. I still think they're going to get the home win for the World Cup.
We got Alex Matthews.
Exactly. We got Zoe Aldcroft.
And Zoe Aldcroft. I'm having them in a fight every time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all we can say is a big congratulations to the Red Roses for coming out on top and winning the Grand Slam in the Women's Six Nations. What more could we ask for? I tell you what more could we want than an address to the nation from El Presidente of the DPRFR? That's what I want. So Rory, hit me with your DPRFR segment.
Well, we were a bit light on magic moments. We didn't have the clean breaks of Murray McCallum the week before. We didn't have wild skills being thrown about the place by the likes of Val Rapava-Ruskin. But I think what we saw was some of the nuts and bolts and fundamentals of good abrasive prop play. And one of the underrated skills of being a prop is negotiation, and diplomacy, and relationship building.
Very important.
And if you are going to have a top diplomat in the DPRFR, to my mind, there's only one option. And he showed all those skills at the weekend.
Yeah.
Willis Genge, our man in Brussels, our man in Japan, our man in Luke Pearce's ear. He's the guy to negotiate you to the best deal possible. If you want to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump at the moment, I say you put him in a room with Alice Genge. Because he wasn't getting the rub of the green from the referee in what was skullduggery.
I'd call it some excellent prop work, personally.
Hey, look, I've spoken about it before. Scrum is as much about cheating as it is about doing things fairly.
Yeah.
And Ellis Genge was getting on the wrong side of those calls, but he eventually managed to negotiate his way to winning a couple of penalties and getting the upper hand and showing the power he does have. I'm a big Ellis Genge fan. I absolutely love him, and I love everything he's doing around the game as well. Check out his foundation that's going to help bring through players from people from his background to play rugby. But the final part of diplomacy is relationship building, and it's knowing when to go hard and when to go soft in a negotiation. And I think we saw him choose the absolutely correct tone when leaving the pitch and engaging the Northampton scrum coach Matt Ferguson.
Yeah.
Matt Ferguson, who I'm certain will have been in his customary on one knee, wearing a beanie, a finger on his chin, just ensuring that the BT cameras catch him at the right time. Yeah. I won't stand up to be mic'd up. I will only be mic'd up in this position. That's very much his brand.
Yeah.
And Ellis Genge spotted an opportunity to exchange some frank views on the way off and ask the hard questions as to why Northampton were refusing to compete in the scrum. Fair question, in my mind, and one that needs to be addressed by Matt Ferguson. We don't know what the answer is yet. Those words haven't come through diplomatic channels at this point. But Ellis Genge is certainly the man to get to the bottom of it, if anyone is.
Well, we've got the right man for the right job in that case.
So the DPRFR's new lead negotiator and top diplomat moving forwards is Mr. Ellis Genge. Look forward to having him on the team.
Well, look forward to working with you, Mr. Genge. I very much look forward to seeing you work in these testing times. And again, as always, thank you ever so much to El Presidente of the DPRFR. As always, it is much appreciated you shedding some wisdom with us all. Now, that's all we got time for this week, Rory. All I can say is I've had a lovely time. We really enjoyed doing our Q&A special in the middle of last week, so I think we're going to try and make that the go-to format for questions and answers going forward. So if you do have any questions for us, please do get in contact with us through any means necessary. We are responsive to all forms of contact, and we will make sure to get them answered during a Q&A special. Maybe once a month, who knows, that regular. We'll see how many questions come in, but we very much enjoyed doing it. And it's just a reminder to, if you're not already, come find us on our TikToks, our Instagrams, our YouTubes, our Discords, our Twitters. We're literally everywhere.
Tell a friend about us. Tell a friend. If you don't think they listen already, tell them to listen.
Yeah, here's a challenge to you listeners. You committed listeners who are listening to this point right now. Tell a friend. Tell them to have a listen and tell them to get in touch and say, X told us to listen and we think you're really good or really bad, but mainly really good. There's a challenge for you, committed listeners.
Don't tell us we're bad.
Yeah, don't tell us we're bad. So before I play the outward jingle, and Rory's had a go at me in the past for not giving him much chance to prepare for this segment that happens in every episode and yet he's still unprepared. Have you got any final words for the listener?
Vive la Gloucester, onwards to Twickenham.
There we have it, folks. That is the end of episode 18 of the Rucks, Mauls and Oval Balls podcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope to have you listen to us again. And don't be a stranger, get in touch if you can. See you next time.